Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Curtis Lake PrimeTime. Hello, Sharon.
Hi, Josh.
Jim.
Hi, Josh.
Sharon and Jim are with us tonight. In fact, this is Jim's debut on Curtis Lake PrimeTime.
Welcome, Jim.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So we're continuing the theme this week of proving that our online pastor is an actual, real, living human being.
I'm a real boy. It's true.
So, but speaking of Jim, you got to make your debut on stage, preaching this past Sunday. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That enabled me to go on vacation for a couple days to the most amazing camping trip ever. Right, Sharon?
Oh, absolutely. It was memorable.
It was memorable. So in the room right now, Sharon's here. Caleb is producing tonight. He was on that wonderful camping trip. I ran into them. So they were up there a day or two before Zachary and I got there. And I ran into them in Walmart in North Conway. They were trying to make their next evening in the tent better than the previous evening in the tent, which apparently was like this recurring theme. Because those of us who were living in tents, it was pretty tough. It was pretty tough.
So who all had tents? I mean, what was the ratio from tents to camper?
Well, interestingly, other than Sharon, it was pretty much the Curtis Lake staff. So me and Caleb, Shayna was in a tent. Sydney was up there; she was in a tent. So I think it was the four of us, and then all the rich people, like the Palmatesses and the Alberts and
Morrison's.
the Rogers and the Morrisons.
And the Quints.
Oh, that's right. The Quints were there too. Yeah. So Quints were there. So it was a good group. We didn't really get to interact with one another because we were all basically divided up into our separate pods.
Whatever
trying to stay
could
out of
fit
the rain.
under the tent.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So there were pop-ups all over the place. There was definitely some people on the campground that they were pros. I mean, you go around and you see some people that had tarps that you didn't even know could be manufactured. I mean, some of these tarps.
I think they were referred to as a circus tent.
Circus tent covers, yes. And they were creating their own little cities with like multiple tents under those tarps. So it was pretty,
Wow,
it was pretty cool.
It's pretty advanced.
Very impressive.
Not us. We were just exposed to the element. So Sharon, what was your favorite thing about camping?
What is
What
normally? Or
No,
what was
this past
this
camping
tip?
trip? Other than the fact that I was there,
And cooking for me a lot of times?
did a lot of cooking.
Yeah, that was nice.
that was
Very
that's
nice.
one of my favorite things.
I always love playing games. Games are a favorite.
You saw a bear.
I did see no, I did not see a bear.
Okay.
The person in front of me or the back of me saw a bear in front of our camper as we were getting ready to leave. You know,
What?
we stopped at the dump station and then there was a bear crossing the road and this woman got out of her car. Did you see that? And of course not, because I was helping my husband and so yeah, a big bear, according to her,
Really?
lumbered across the road, which happens almost every single time we're leaving, but I never see it.
Oh, wow. Almost like people are making it up.
Almost, but they are active up there, so I know it's
Sure. So you and Peter were dumping poo out of your camper and missed the bear. That's too
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
That's too bad. Well, we didn't see any bear, any bears, any bear. I didn't see any bears.
That's too bad.
What was your favorite part?
My favorite part was leaving. But yeah, that was the most beautiful day of all was Monday morning. The sun came out and it was nice and warm and wonderful while we were packing everything up to get out of there by checkout time. So
Well, it was nice that it dried things out a little bit.
yeah, it was. No, my favorite thing was, like it always is, it's really like the group of people that are there and you know, playing the games, just eating food. We eat pretty good.
Yeah.
We do. Like historically, we eat pretty well up there. And normally, you know, nighttime there's the fire and people linger around the fire for hours, and that was hard to do. Pretty much for every night except for the last night. We finally didn't have any rain coming down, and so people were actually reluctant to go to bed that night. So, but I think my favorite thing is, now a lot of you might not know this, but one of our favorite things to do around here is to make Sharon laugh until she has to use her inhaler.
I've noticed this since I started. It
Yeah.
seems like it's a timeless tradition.
Right. It's not super hard to do either. That's the funny thing, but that is one of our favorite pastimes. And so I said something so funny that Sharon laughed.
It's gonna happen now.
She inhaled, she snorted, and she peed her pants a little. So we kind of had we
Wow.
got it all. Yeah.
That is not true. Oh, do not
can you-
believe
can you
everything
repeat
that Pastor Josh says.
Can you repeat what you said?
I
Do you
can't.
remember
I
what
have
it
no.
was?
I don't even.
I have
don't
no
even know
idea
what
what
it
he
was.
said
I don't
either,
remember.
but it was
Wow.
funny.
It was fun. We laughed for a while.
Wow.
So. Anyway, so we were out there having fun, and Jim, you were working.
Yeah, probably.
You were here.
Thanks, Jim.
a few of our really rugged folks like Caleb and Sydney and Shayna, they actually trekked back here early Sunday morning to help make sure church went on Sunday morning. So we appreciate that, and then came back later on after church was over. But Jim, tell us a little bit about Sunday morning, how that experience was for you, and
Yeah, so I mean, it was exciting. It was my first time doing that. I think I mentioned it was really my first time preaching in front of a larger amount of people. I'd done a very short message at a church plant in Erie a few years ago that one of my old friends he gave me the privilege of doing a little bit there, but since then, really nothing. And so it was exciting. It was good to have Shayna here just beforehand and making sure I was all set up and ready to go, as well as just making sure I know when I'm supposed to come out and when things are going to end and that sort of thing. So, I've had a lot of experience with public speaking in the military, and so public speaking or speaking in front of people, definitely that's not as big of a hurdle for me, I guess I would say. But what I was trying to remain focused on was just how awesome of a privilege that is to be able to, have the trust and the responsibility to give the word of God to people. And so I wanted to do right by that. And I did my very best to prepare, and I think it went all right. I asked everybody for honest feedback, and I don't know if everybody's just being nice or.
Yeah. Well, they generally will, and we'll give anybody one shot at it anyway.
Right.
So, the question is whether or not you get up there again. So
Is that why you wanted to invite him to next year's camping trip?
that's right. Yeah, Jim, you really should go camping with
See,
us.
I knew there was something to that.
When I was in school, I remember one of my homiletics, or it was probably my homiletics teacher, said, encouraged all the preachers to listen to about 5% of what you hear, both good and bad, right? I mean, people will come up and they'll tell you all kinds of wonderful, wonderful things about what they thought about your sermon, and that may be nice and everything, but who knows how sincere it is. And on the other side, you'll oftentimes get a lot of criticism, for things that you say or share. And, that's just sometimes the way it goes. And so, but I thought you did a great job. I watched both the messages afterward.
Is that part of the 5% I'm allowed to take on board? Or
You can do whatever you want with that. Jim, generally I try to be authentic and sincere. So, no, you did a great job. So we talked about the sluggard, so we might as well get into it. Those of you that are out there listening live right now on Facebook or on Church Online, like always, feel free. If you have any questions, any comments, any feedback you want to share while we're kind of going on, we'll try to monitor the chat channels there and interact with you in that way. So feel free to just type into the chat menu. That'll be great. But so anyway, we're talking about the sluggard.
It's the sluggard.
The sluggard.
Yes.
Fun word to say. I felt like when you were reading the text, you really enjoyed
It's a
bringing
fun
out
word.
that word.
It is a fun word.
Yeah.
And when I was preparing for that, there's all these different visuals that come to mind, but just the word sluggard in and of itself is just a fun word to say.
Yeah.
So, and now that'll be a part of my vocab, I suppose, in a certain sense, whereas before it wouldn't have been.
You mean like with some of the volunteers that you have working with you?
No.
Oh, no, of course not. Not volunteers.
No.
But
No.
people at work.
No.
No, not them either.
No.
Right.
No.
Certainly not anybody at home.
Yes. Definitely nobody. Some of the cats, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a fun word. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting just through the flow of that and in preparation, how I was looking at that word and how I was looking at the context of that passage, and just sort of flowing back and forth from thinking about this as the sluggard as this external person or somebody else, and then the sluggard being me, or the sluggard being like this sort of person over my shoulder making decisions, and just working through that, and then kind of recognizing like, oh yeah, it's the sluggard kind of takes over from time to time. So yeah.
That's
Sharon,
never-
what did you think? You didn't say anything to me. I want 5%.
No, I thought it was a good message. I always like a good message on work, mostly because I oversee volunteers, and I like to get them to try to do things.
Do some of it.
Do some of it, so I don't have to do all of it. Or, I always do appreciate those, but it's so convicting at the same time, because I certainly identify, with some of those negative traits. I'm the busiest lazy person probably, or the laziest busy person whichever way you want to look at it. I definitely constantly try to fight against that laziness, just I'll do it later kind of thing.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly identify with what you talked about when it comes to procrastination and working under pressure.
Yep.
I mean, I'm the same way. I feel like I'm built that way, that until I love how you brought out the fact that when I have a lot of time to get something done, I'm going to use up all of that time.
Yes, you will.
Not to get it done, right? Because nothing is getting done
Right.
in that space until you're right up against that last hour where I now just have just enough time to get it done. And it's amazing the kind of pain that introduces into your life, right?
Yes.
And not only pain for you, but my wife would tell you that creates pain for other people, right? When I have a tendency to just kind of run from one thing to the next. And camping was a perfect example of that. It was no surprise that I was going camping. And for something like that, I'll generally throw everything together, the night before I go, just go home. It doesn't take me long to pack my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that by experience. I mean, I can get all the stuff that I personally need for a trip assembled and ready to go in about 7 minutes.
Wow.
I can take care of a week's worth of stuff. But camping's a little bit different. I mean, there's some additional things that go into that. And for probably the 5th time in a row, we didn't bring a flashlight or any form of light to the camp trip. So what does that mean? That means I now have to go to Walmart and purchase my 5th iteration of the same thing that we only use this once a year, right? But now I have this nice collection of lanterns that we can use in the tent, and probably I'll do the same thing. It's because I just didn't plan for it. The most frustrating thing, especially given that some of these guys were out there for 4 nights, 5 days. Zach and I were just going for a couple nights. And so our time was shortened, and then shortened even more by the rain. And I needed stuff for cooking. I needed butane for these cooktop things that we have that are a necessary component for getting my meals cooked. And I just took for granted that I will be able to get those like I've always been able to get those, pop into Walmart the night before. So I'm at Walmart between 10 and 11 o'clock, the night before we're going, when I should probably be sleeping and resting. And I can't find them anywhere. And then, we head off to North Conway, and I have to stop at multiple places looking for this stupid thing, right? Wasted a bunch of time, like a lot of time that I could have been just enjoying
Right.
being at the campground. It probably cost me an extra hour, a couple hours.
Yeah.
So that's what happens. You know, you procrastinate, it definitely creates unnecessary pain in your life.
A lot of stress.
Stress too, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, even just besides the wasted time, that's what I feel is just it's just unnecessary stress. I just let pile up, and then that combined with that pressure, and then it has to get done, and it gets done ultimately, and then that stress is gone. But it's why do I put myself through that? That's the sluggard. Study the ant, figure out how not to be the sluggard.
Yeah. Yeah, so 3 of the things that you brought out, just to kind of rehash a little bit, and you can feel free to correct any of this now if we didn't interpret it correctly. But the sluggard doesn't make up his mind; he doesn't get started. I love that, especially in this particular season. I feel like one of the great challenges that we've had as a community of people, and certainly as a faith community, is just getting ourselves restarted. Getting things going again. This morning I went to I kind of moved the stuff that I was using the van for camping, and I had moved my stuff into the car. And I get into the car, sit down, and hit the start button, and my car doesn't start. It doesn't have any power. I don't know why. I have to go figure that out later on, but probably just needs to jump. You know, maybe a light was on, and some interior light, because I hadn't used it in a couple days. So I had to move everything back into the van and then head to work. But it's amazing the energy that it takes to just get things started. And man, you know, all you folks out there, I just want to encourage you, don't keep waiting. You know, I mean, at some point, I get it. We've been holed up for a long time, but man, it is time to get back to work. You know,
Things at rest stay at rest.
they do. Yeah.
Things in motions tend to stay in motions.
Yeah.
Time to get in motion.
Yeah. Inertia is such a real force.
It is.
In the physical realm and certainly in the spiritual realm. But you know, it's something that we just have to consciously kind of get over that. A person wants to get on some exercise or diet plan. At some point you have to pull the trigger. Like, I'm just going to do it.
Right.
You know, here we go. And
it's very easy to make a plan and feel good about this plan, but that's not the actual work.
Right.
Yeah.
And doing the actual work and consistently doing it and having the discipline to do it, that's what actually gets you to where you want to go. You can have the greatest plan in the world, but if you don't execute on it, it's no more than the paper it's on.
Right. Right. That's the second thing you talked about, right? Was the fact that the slugger doesn't finish the job.
Right.
Right. He doesn't maintain. I thought that was or sustain, I think is the word you used. He just doesn't sustain his work in completing what he's begun. So.
Yeah, that's and I mean, I think of all the 3 different ways the sluggard acts. That's probably the one I relate to the most with my own personal things. Like I think I made the reference about working out. I can't count how many times I start on a good workout plan and I follow through on it for a couple weeks, and my alarm's going off at 3:30 or 4 in the morning or whatever, and it's all good. And then my frame of mind that I was in when I was making that plan and that motivation I had and the goals that were at the front of my brain, like they're nowhere to be found a week or 2 later. And all of a sudden just, I'm not doing it anymore. forgotten why. And that's the one I struggle with the most. Just starting, going for a bit, stopping, then having to reboot and starting again, getting off track, starting again, getting off track.
Right.
Just that cycle. So.
Yeah. Are there any projects around the church that we should talk to Jim about right now in front of everybody to just here's a couple things, you might want to just
gonna go that way. Almost thought we'd go.
Listen, I don't
There
know.
are lots of projects.
It was the sovereignty of the Lord, Jim, that ultimately had you working on this message. That's generally how it works. That's how I feel.
It was really,
Sunday after Sunday. It's like, really, this is what I need to preach.
It was just for me. Yeah.
So, anyway, just to kind of wrap up, I thought, I don't know if this was your real main takeaway, but I thought what can be a really, really good takeaway from that message was how the sluggard treats each moment like it's no big deal.
Yep.
right? It just carries about his life or her life as if there's no long-term or eternal consequence to what they're doing in that moment. Like that moment is just no big deal. Now, we all need that, right? That's what the Sabbath is all about, this day of rest that we're supposed to incorporate into our weekly life. And we find examples of the importance of rest. We find Jesus resting. It's not like Jesus was doing ministry 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? Like he had to steal away, get away from the crowds, get away even from, his knucklehead disciples from time to time and rest, right? We need that as human beings. God made us and created us to be that way. But there's this reality, and I'm sure practically everybody could identify with this notion of, there's been times where I just sort of woke up one day and said, where did the time go?
Right.
Like, what did I even do this week? Or, what did I even do this last year? And if I had written a letter to myself about where I want to be and where I want to go, and were to open that letter 2-3 years later, would I have even made any inroads into any of those things? And so I think as followers of Jesus, it is absolutely paramount for us to be considering the sacredness of the moments that we're given. Like, and how would that change our lives? How would that change the perspective that we take? This day is actually a gift from God.
Yeah,
and it's his.
And it's funny because it shouldn't take this, but all too often you hear these stories about people who have like a near-death experience, or they get that diagnosis or whatever it might be, and then all of a sudden time has a whole different worth to it. And if we were to just even live, 10% of that,
right,
it'd be amazing.
Yeah, that happened to Sharon today in the traffic circle. Near-death experience in the traffic circle.
Wow.
Yeah.
That might be a bit of an exaggeration.
Oh, did I over dramatize what happened?
A little bit.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
My car barely shows anything.
So slight grazing with another vehicle.
Now I want to hear what happened.
Yeah.
Not my fault.
And this time she wasn't checking emails or,
Working from
creating
the
a
car
budget or
office.
doing anything else while she was driving. Yeah. Sometimes she's in there making cards and doing all kinds of things. I mean, I don't know. But she talks about being lazy and,
Making cards on the way at 109. I can see that.
Oh my goodness. I don't know why I show up here every week. Take this abuse.
So cool. All right. Anything else on that?
One of the things I like to do when I go camping is reads, just fun reading. And so I'd picked up a book. It was a used book, which, interestingly enough, not half the pages, but a good number of pages had pressed flowers in between them. So like every 5 pages, I'm scraping off these big petals so that I can read the text. It was strange. I mean, it was a book called The Stranger in the Woods, The Extraordinary Story of the Last True Hermit. And it was about a hermit in Maine. He survived all by himself for 27 years in the woods of Maine. And he survived mostly because he stole from some neighbor camps. But he had his own little setup. He didn't get discovered. He spoke, according to him, one word to a hiker who he happened upon unexpectedly. He said hi. But for 27 years, he didn't talk to anybody. He just went about his day. He did his work. He just knew what had to be done. And for him, it was survival. He had to trek across the lake. He had to, when things he was stealing, sometimes they were light, they were, Twinkies. Sometimes it was propane tanks that he'd have to schlep back and forth to his camp. And he wanted to do it without leaving a trace. So he was careful where he stepped. And it was a fascinating story, but you think about, like, his existence was like an ant. He knew what he had to do every single day. He knew that, while the going was good, in the summer, not in the winter, he had to do what he needed to do for survival. And he also said that it was important to get enough sleep because he couldn't do the work if he wasn't. So it was all a balance, but it was interesting that he didn't consider it to be a chore or even work. It was just something he needed to do. And I wonder sometimes how we would how we would be different if we just instead of complaining about things, we just did what needed to be done. Like not looking for a pat on the back, not looking for sympathy.
Right.
Just do the work that needs to be done. And that's in all manners, of our life, I think. But it's a fascinating read.
And you can let somebody else borrow it.
I could.
Sans flowers.
Well, there's still the remnants of them.
Oh. Does it smell nice?
It didn't smell at all.
All right. So be careful when you're buying used books.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So with that, why don't we segue into the video from the Right Now Media Road Trip to Truth. So we watched session 5.
5.
Was it 5? Session 5 this week. Hopefully we all watched the same thing. That's the one you watched?
That's
okay.
what I watched.
So hopefully we'll all be talking about the same thing. So if you haven't had a chance to check out that video, once again, just encourage you to do that. This is kind of talking about some of this stuff that comes up with the theory of the origin of a universe apart from God, right? And mankind has for a long time been on this quest in the modern era to help prove that it is possible to get to this place where God is no longer necessary as some agent of creation, that there is a naturalistic way to explain the origin of the universe and ultimately how we all got here. And so the big question, I think one of the big questions that comes out of this video is, first of all, does God exist? Does God exist? And I would like to identify at least 3 categories of people in regard to this question. One category would be those people that don't believe a God exists, like the true atheist, the person that is just utterly opposed to the idea that there is some supreme being, however you identify him, not the God of Christianity, not the God of Islam, not even the God of panentheism, but just that everything is ultimately explainable through naturalistic reasoning. Then there's the category of people that believe that God exists and is involved in the creation that he is ultimately responsible for. Christians would fall into that category, believing that God is the one who's responsible for what we see. And then there's this third, I don't know if I call them this in-between category, but somebody that would probably not outright deny the existence of God. They might consider themselves just unsure, agnostic in a sense as to whether or not God exists, or maybe would say that it is unreasonable to think that God doesn't exist, but they live their lives as if there is no God. That's who I think the Bible's talking about when it says the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Right? You know that verse. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's talking about an atheist.
Right.
I think when that was written, there was no such thing as an atheist. Like, you can find an atheist anywhere. Most people believed in a huge plurality of gods back when that was written. There was no such thing as a person that didn't believe in the existence of some other being, of some creator type being. It was quite the opposite. But this proverb or this saying is essentially saying that the person lives their life. It's like they wouldn't say it out loud with their lips because mentally they don't even necessarily agree that, but they live their lives day to day as if there is no God, and that's a category of person that I think a lot of people could probably get lumped into. I think it's a category of people that even we sometimes weave in and out of, talking about living our lives as if those moments that we're given aren't this sacred gift from God, as if there's no eternal consequence. That's essentially living as if there is no God. It's living as if there's no God who we are ultimately accountable to. I think we're all guilty of that to some degree. So many people reject the idea of God, either absolutely, like I said, in the case of an atheist, or at least personally. And I think the video does a good job of kind of bringing out the reality that isn't necessarily done for good reason. Right? It's not done because there's a lot because that person can come up with all kinds of really good reasons why you shouldn't believe in God, but rather it's a conclusion that they've arrived at because of some prejudice that they already have, where like they don't want God. They don't want a universe in which God is necessary because they don't want to ultimately have to think about or live under that potential accountability if there was a God. So just by way of introduction, I'd say that what we live in today, what it seems to me is like we have this conflict between, or this alleged conflict between like science and religion, right? One of the big things you see on signs all over the place is science is real.
Oh yeah.
You seen that?
Oh yeah.
Right. People wearing T-shirts, right? And it's got this whole list of things that extol these certain virtues. One of those being science is real, and packaged into that is the idea that like science is somehow superior to religion, and so science is smart, and believing in God is stupid. Right. That's one of the things that
implied.
I think that's one of the things that a lot of people who are Christians or people who subscribe to some religion probably feel a little bit of inferiority sometimes. Like if they don't know how to argue themselves through that, a lot of times people can be made to feel really small. It's like, wow, you believe in God? Like how dumb could you be?
Right.
Like how idiotic a notion. How old are you? Are you a child? Like, because it's almost made to be that believing in God is like believing in Santa Claus. That's a fairy tale that's good for when you're young and immature, but not necessarily something that you should be continuing to hold to. And so you should always be looking to science for an explanation of essentially everything. And with that, agnosticism is smart. Right. Agnosticism is the idea that, well, I just don't know. I just can't know. And so we've elevated agnosticism to being the place where the intellectual dwells and belief is stupid. To hold firm to some belief.
And it implies that any sort of certainty would be arrogant. And so living in that agnostic realm kind of absolves you from any responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it keeps you up in that sort of lofty sort of space of ideas. No, everything's relative, or how can we be truly certain? Your truth is your truth. My truth is my truth. Mm-hmm. That sort of relative, wishy-washy worldview that doesn't really get anyone anywhere at the end.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting about interesting and frustrating at the same time about the supposed conflict between science and religion is comparing these two things as if science in and of itself is not a process that is abstract from whatever it's studying, whether it's religion, the existence of God, chemistry, anything else. And it just becomes this dogma it becomes a religion in and of itself. And these conclusions that are popular in the secular scientific community, finding and proving those, whatever evidence it is towards those ends, that's what science is. It's not really about finding truth or testing or going through that process to find truth or to find theories or get from a hypothesis to a theory, whatever direction you're going. It's a brand, and that's what's so frustrating about it, because there are so many inroads within science and faith and the study of that, the study of the afterlife, and it's really neat. But in popular culture today, it is just this sort of like, you're either here or you're here, like you said. If you're questioning the existence of God, or maybe you believe in God, or you're even toying with the idea, then you're just a buffoon. You're outside of, you keep that to yourself. There's nothing valid about that. If that's something personal to you, don't bring it in here. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to know that Christians are not against science.
right.
I mean, history would actually demonstrate otherwise.
Oh, yeah,
right? A real honest assessment of history reveals that some of the most ardent scientists were exploring the unknown and seeking out answers to what we didn't already understand because of their love for and adoration of the universe God created. Like, think about that. It's really often quite the opposite. It's, those that don't hold or haven't held a high view of God that oftentimes fell into these pits of just explaining what we would take for granted at, I know why that happened, or I know how that worked. Like we understand how a disease works,
right.
Where millennia ago, disease was some curse,
right,
from an angry God, right? That you just failed to please, and sacrifices needed to be made, right? And so, yeah, I mean, the pursuit of science I think it's a really, really God honoring thing.
Absolutely.
And so to try to set these two things apart from one another as if they can't coexist is absolutely crazy.
It's frustrating when it's almost a pseudoscience that they're setting forth, because when you rationally think through a lot of it, like, how can you possibly get from nothing to where we are? The Big Bang happened. Well, where was the stuff? How did that stuff come into being so that it could bang? It seems to be flawed in that there are some holes in their arguments, and they don't necessarily address those. And I think one of the quotes in the video was, "It's a way not to have to deal with it." So, atheism, agnosticism is a way not to have to deal with the existence of God and my accountability to him. If someone made me, I'm accountable to him. I'm his creation. What am I doing? Am I following what my creator wants for me? It's an out. But man, people spend so much time trying to look for that out. And I get it, because there are lots of times when I look for the easy way out too. But there is just a whole lot of effort and money and just anger sometimes put into disproving the existence of God. And you don't your argument, just because you're louder and you're quote unquote scientific doesn't make you smarter or right.
Right.
I don't know. I find it just hard to believe that rational people can't come to the, just to the belief that there has to be a God, that there has to be a mind that created all this. If you look at all the intricacies, many, many years ago, I attended a concert. I'm not sure who it was. I think it was Mercy Me, and Louis Giglio was a speaker at it, and he did this whole space kind of presentation and the beauty of the creation and just the intricacies of how things are made and the galaxy. That how could that just be the result of happenstance?
I can't remember what book it was. I wish I could give credit to whoever used this example, but just they're drawing the comparison of what it would look like for that one single-celled organism to finally come together, a protein strand, whatever they suggest is the first piece of the puzzle in the evolutionary chain. And the example they used was it'd be the same chance of a tornado going through a junkyard and constructing a space shuttle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that complex, and that's why it's unfortunate, because there are plenty of extremely smart people out there in the scientific community and academia and everywhere else that see the same evidence, and they come to the conclusion that there is a God from science, from looking at the exact same evidence, because they see the clues that are left behind, the fingerprints of God and everything, and in creation and design, and it shows. I mean, but then that word science is owned by the far out there. I guess I don't know what the word but just the atheist side of thinking as far as science goes. But you can use science to you can make conclusions with that same evidence for the existence of God, and there's plenty of people that are out there that do make that exact or come to that same conclusion. I think you said earlier that it tends to be the people with the loudest voices that, and it's too bad. But I mean, there's lots of very, very smart people out there that they write books, and they've got lots of opinions out there, and they debate some of the louder voices out there. And man, you could see it either way. Some very, very, very smart people making arguments out there.
It's interesting sometimes of who gets the platform. So if you look actually, take for instance pop culture and music artists. There are lots of talented people out there.
Sure.
But there is a segment of the industry that decides who the next star is, who the next. They're deciding it. They're charting the course, and that's what the scientists sometimes tend to do. Like, they're trying to push their agenda,
right?
But not all scientists believe that.
Right.
There are plenty of scientists who believe in creation, who believe in the existence of God as our creator, but they're not the ones that are given the green light,
right,
by the decision makers. I don't even know who they are.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, know who they are, like
right. Sure.
But they exist. I know they exist.
Right. I mean, obviously somebody's in control of, what's allowed in a textbook. And I mean, we know that growing up in school, it is not the theory of evolution, for instance, is not given the same weight as a worldview that talks about intelligent design and a creator. It's like that's utterly left out and abandoned, right? And we ultimately start teaching evolution as something that's matter of fact,
right?
Even though there are some incredible problems with the theory, some incredible holes that you would think, why are the scientists okay with these, right? And a lot of times it's explained away with, well, we just don't, we don't have that information. We've filled in the gaps with our best conjecture, but ultimately time is going to be necessary to let that prove itself out. And well, that doesn't sound very scientific to me.
Right.
Like why not just go with the science? And I'm all for. You know what? I'd be perfectly happy with a playground that was set up where you really followed the rules, and with no bias and prejudice, you went after the science and just let that lead you to where it wants to go. Because I am 100% convinced that does not lead you away from a God who created the universe. Like in no way, shape, or form. In fact, I think it does exactly the opposite. Because whatever you think about evolution, and there are people that are atheistic evolutionists. That's kind of like when the video is talking about evolution, it's looking at evolution within the context of no creator.
Right.
There are also theistic evolutionists that believe there is some degree of evolution, even the evolution possibly of mankind. But that was all initially established by God, who created the natural processes, including the processes of evolution. Either of those things are still problematic because we don't have any evidence that evolution has taken place.
Right.
We know that organisms have changed over time,
just it. I mean,
and there's been adaptation, but there's no actual evidence that an organism has become another organism.
Right.
And we should have that evidence.
And that's where it gets problematic. Like I said, it becomes this dogma where the conclusions drive the evidence. So evolution,
Right.
I mean, you've got macroevolution all the way down to microevolution. Microevolution being something that is observable. I mean, we see adaptations within species, and we see the divergence of kinds into new species of animals. So that's evolution. That's microevolution. But the worldview of evolution, the package of science, would say that you have to buy the whole thing. You know, you're either all in or you're in the crazy people camp.
Right. Yeah, because it's required, right? I mean, you have to start with something that is a common ancestor that ultimately produces the rest of everything else, right? And I love how the video just brings out the reality that, I mean, that's really problematic. And we know that that the solution of, just given enough time, right? Given millions and millions and billions of years,
and
we can get here. And it's like, no, you can't.
And that time frame keeps getting longer and
right.
longer.
Right. Which isn't, but ultimately it doesn't even matter.
Right.
This particular person in the video here said it doesn't matter how much time you allow for. Go ahead and say 50 billion years, even though we know the universe isn't that old. No scientist believes the universe is more than 12, 13 billion years old. So we're already working within the confines of that. And he says, but it doesn't matter. With what randomness figures into the equation, it's just not possible. They talk about, this is a fun trick you can use with your friends, when you're talking about such things, but this concept of irreducible complexity, right? The fact that there are systems and there are the biological things that they just can't come about, right? Because of their interdependence upon one another. So you say, well, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And you're left with, no, I need this to have this, and I need this to have this.
Right.
Right. So how did it ultimately happen? And it is absolutely mind-boggling to really honestly assess what it would take for the mass of the universe that is mindless and lifeless to actually within itself create mindfulness and life. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. It's not rational.
Right.
And yet it doesn't matter. Right. And I think that, again, kind of speaks to this motivation. And you know what? I'd like to know who those people are, too. Who is that group of people that's ultimately controlling? That's ultimately controlling.
If you're listening and it's you, call 324-0652.
But, yeah. And I think that's just from a Christian standpoint, what's at stake is, are some pretty incredible things too. Where does if we're all ultimately here as some result of a mindless universe, then what value do any of us even have?
Right.
Right. I think that was a really great thing that it kind of brought out, was just the inherent value that belongs to every individual. And value actually emanates from the concept that God created us. And he created us in his image and in his likeness, and has an immense amount of love for us who he's created individually. And so, evolution doesn't allow for that. Evolution is actually kind of the opposite, right? Evolution abhors the weak, right? Evolution says, hey, in order to evolve and to become better, you need to get rid of the weak.
Right.
And so people who subscribe to evolution and who are also fighting for, justice and other social, they're not actually even being consistent with their own ideology. I love that they're fighting for justice and other, important social issues, but I wonder if they even realize that that's inconsistent with a worldview that says, it's better for the weak to die off. It's better for us to get rid of.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that in the 20th century is very ugly. Because it really goes back to in the 1800s and just the advent of humanism and then evolutionary humanism, and you can trace so many societal ills back to that, and especially we saw in the 20th century with communism and Pol Pot, the genocide, of course, Hitler, eugenics, and still to this day, that goes of all that. The abortion industry is, that all goes back to where we take God out of our picture of humanity, and life loses its value very, very quickly. And it's just, it's like you said, there are massive, massive consequences for us as a people of God, as God's creations, individually and collectively. And I mean, I can say for myself, even just the spiritual consequences of contemplating these questions, it is important. I know the guy in the video is asking, does it really matter? And I mean, I can say from personal experience how much it mattered to me, and without going into my whole testimony, but I became a Christian when I was 17 years old. And a big part of that was because of conversations I had that were very similar to this, and recognizing that there were alternative worldviews besides just the evolutionary humanist worldview that I'd been taught in public school. And seeing that, and whether I bought wholeheartedly at the time into these other models of the history of the earth, or just another way of seeing the landscape of the earth and science and the existence of God, it all of a sudden it clicked with me like, wow, I don't have to believe this model completely, but this sounds just as possible, having listened to these people and contemplating these things. And that was a big part of my what ultimately led me to Jesus Christ. And I really, when I hear him asking people, like, does it really matter? It's like, it doesn't really matter. It's like, it really does. It matters for so many reasons, personally and big picture.
Yeah.
Well, one of the kids in the video, college student, in the video said, we're specks of dust on specks of dust on specks of dust.
Yeah.
Well, that just makes me want to get up in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Study hard, right, for your next test.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why would that matter then? What does anything that we do matter? But I think everybody understands that there are things that matter, and without that, if you don't think that, then I guess you can you subscribe to the fact that, it was just, a big bang and that was it and there's no God. But that's, if you look at people who believe that, we're specks of dust on specks of dust on specks of dust, I would guarantee that those people have got to go through some severe depressive moments. And I just don't understand how you could subscribe to something that says that you don't matter, that
Right.
nobody matters, nothing matters.
Right. Yeah. And I don't, the very fact of who that person was, like, I just don't believe that person actually believes that.
Right.
Like you could press with, just a little bit of dialogue and I think reveal the lack of integrity with that statement that they're making. Right. Because it's like, wait a minute, you're a college student investing time and probably an incredible amount of money because you see something that's valuable, right? Because the reality is, if a person really believed that, they wouldn't get out of bed.
Right.
They just wouldn't. But the fact that we have this concept of worth and value, they talk about beauty, how the existence of beauty, that just the very fact that that's a thing reveals that there's some kind of mindfulness that we have, and that mindfulness had to have come from somewhere. It couldn't have just come from inorganic matter that existed in some cesspool.
I mean, we're all wired. I mean, we're all wired to question that and to have this connection with God. I mean, every single one of us. And it's a book I read a few years ago by Dinesh D'Souza called God Forsaken. And he explores that whole side of what you were just suggesting, and goes really in depth into the thinking of atheism. And he makes a very valid, compelling argument, I should say, that the majority of people who would espouse themselves to be atheists don't actually believe of a lot of what they say. But it's not that they don't believe in God, but that they're ultimately deep down angry with God. And I think Sharon, you had mentioned it earlier. There's also just a piece of not wanting to be responsible and having an excuse to absolve themselves from that responsibility, that accountability. So
that book that I mentioned before, he would describe himself, I guess, as an atheist, and he's, with the exception of one time when it was like 20 degrees below zero and he was freezing in the middle of winter. I mean, because he never lit a fire, to stay warm. And, he said, when it's 20 below and for several days, then you do believe in God.
Yeah.
So, well, a lot of our audience, we're not trying to convince them that there is a God, right? A lot of people that are listening to this today. So I think it'd be appropriate for us to just close with the reminder that, hey, we do subscribe to the fact that God created this wonderful world, and he has given us this wonderful gift that we call life, and that life is to be lived with purpose. So let's not just waste it away and live as if there is no God, but let's live as if, the God that we know that we will one day answer to and give an account for our lives and for these sacred moments that he gives us every day. Let's be ready.
Yep.
Let's be living our lives in the pursuit of making sure that our lives matter and that they count and that they reflect an appreciation for the glory of God and the glory of this life that he's given us.
Let's be the ant that Jim talked about.
Let's be the ant.
We've got work to do.
We do. Are you like one of those little tiny fire ants, or one of those big, fat, gross ones that are... I probably shouldn't say it that way.
The winged ant.
The winged ants? Yeah. I want to be the one. Yeah, I want to be the one that can fly around.
Yeah.
Oh, those are nasty.
But I don't know if they get a lot of work done. So, all right. Well, we're out of time. So,
On that note.
yeah, I think we'll end there. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be back again next Wednesday night for another edition of Primetime. Hope you have a great night, great week. We'll see you next time.